And welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to have a look at my game from the weekend in the German Bundesliga against Anish Giri. And this was on Sunday. On Saturday, I played against Grandmaster Markus Raga, where I managed to secure a draw in a more boring game. But I want to share with you the game against Anish on Sunday, where I had the white pieces. Before we jump into the game, I just briefly want to say a couple of words about Anish. I mean, I don't think he needs any sort of introduction, but it was just great to play against him. I remember growing up, he was always one of the superstars and still is. So it's always kind of it's just an honor to then play against these super strong players. Specifically, Anish, I always have respected quite a lot, simply because he's so hardworking. You can always see his preparation is one of the best in the world, and of course also his understanding in general. But in this game, I actually surprised Anish on move 4, so quite early. In the game, I played e4, which is the first time I played e4 actually in quite some time. But I think it's the first game this year. No, I had one game in the Czech Extra League where I also played e4. But generally, I haven't played e4 that much. So probably it came somewhat of a surprise to him. But still, he played quite fast, c5, knight f3, and now knight c6. And after bishop b5, he played immediately e6, which is a line he hasn't played that much recently. In Tata Steel, he had one game against Caruana in g6. And in general, he's playing quite a lot of different openings. I mean, especially he's playing the knight, this is kind of his main weapon. But in this game, he wanted to surprise me with this move e6. But here, I somewhat surprised him, at least with c3. After the game, we briefly spoke, and he told me that, of course, he has seen this move before, but wasn't quite aware of the details anymore. And immediately played a move which I, in return, didn't know, knight f6. Instead, what is kind of the best move in a position is d5. But over the board, it's already a move which is not maybe that easy to see for black. Because black is still quite underdeveloped here, and you're just opening up the diagonal for the bishop on b5, and now the knight and the king are pinned. After d5, white has two options: either e takes d5, or after queen takes d5, short castle. White probably has the easier play, at least. After e5, this would then transpose to some other lines. I think this could come out of the French, for example, or some Alapin as well. But after d5, there's also this option d3, which I think Niels Grondelius also played. And also this position is not so easy for black to play, since white's development here comes pretty natural over short castle. Sometimes bishop f4 is an idea, especially before bishop d6, of course, is played. And then something like rook e1, knight d2, and in general, yeah, at least I personally quite like white's position. But he played knight f6, which is actually also quite logical, but I wasn't aware of that move. And here I spent just way too much time. So what I can already say, what I learned from this game is that I really need to take control of my time management. That was simply, not acceptable here. I think I spent like almost 30 minutes on move 4. So I really need to work on that, especially for my upcoming tournaments. And in the end, I went for the move e5, which is anyway quite logical. I mean, this is simply not a critical position where you're supposed to think for too long. I was mostly thinking between e5 and queen e2. So these were the two moves I was thinking about here. If queen e2, my idea was, for example, bishop e7, short castle, and then I played d4 without having played e5. But after queen e2, I mean, there were then many things which I was thinking about. For example, queen b6 is also not so clear, just stopping d4 for now. And in the end, I decided to go for e5 just because it looks quite logical. Now knight d5 and short castle, and here he played d6. In general, I was often thinking about taking on c6 here, but after b takes c6, I thought that he will get some counterplay in the center with either f6 or even d6 in some cases. And this move c3 is not really what you want in general here, because it does weaken the light squares a little bit. But I went for short castle, and he anyway went d6, and here I played quite fast d4. But it turns out I even had quite a nice chance here with the move c4. Now he should probably go to e7, because if he goes to c7, for example, then I can take here. And now this knight is very, very much misplaced on c7. It wants to reach this d4 square, but yeah, that's why knight e7 would be better, because then First of all, now after taking, you can take with the knight. But second of all, in some cases, even this structure, the knight on e7 will be probably quite a lot better because it can go to f5. But after c4, knight e7, I had this move e d6, queen d6, knight c3, knight f5, knight e4, queen c7, and now b4. This is what I wanted to point out. Apparently very strong for white, and white has a very nice initiative. Even earlier, I think computer was showing somewhere b4 as well. Maybe it was here. So these were some ideas here for white. I guess here it's with the idea after takes a3. We have some sort of like a Banco Gambit idea here for white, which I found quite interesting. But instead I went d4, quite logical. Now he took cd, cd, and bishop d7. And now we have some sort of Alapin structure, which can arise, for example, in this line here, knight f6, e5, knight d5, knight f3, e6, d4, takes, something like this. It's very similar to the game. So he played bishop d7. Now he has this nasty threat of knight takes e5. For example, if I do something like, I don't know, rook e1, he could take on e5. And if I take back, my bishop is hanging. And if he takes on d7, then he can take back with the knight and simply one a pawn. So this is his idea here. I played bishop d3, therefore d takes e5, d takes e5, bishop e7. I was a little bit surprised that he already took here on e5. I thought he could hold the tension, but anyway, it's quite logical. Takes, bishop e7. And here I played this move bishop e4, probably with the wrong idea in general. I mean, I understood that I, in most cases, don't want to take here, but I just didn't see a better plan because somehow the bishop on e4 looks quite nice. Maybe a3 short castle followed by bishop d2 would be strong for white, because I was thinking about positions like this with the idea of queen e2, but here I never really liked knight a5, and all of a sudden he's threatening to jump into b3. But yeah, even here, perhaps I have some queen e4 ideas. So it would have been better to go for this plan, especially bishop d2 is nice just to kind of stop knight e5, because then I could always theoretically take. But I went bishop e4, short castle, and now I went queen e2. Like, for example, here, if I take on d5, takes, queen d5, black is fine for sure. He could do something like bishop e6, and in an endgame like this, he just has very nice compensation with the pair of bishops. I think even here, knight b4 was my concrete issue, when, yeah, there are all sorts of threats now all of a sudden, and I have to be very careful already. So instead, I went queen e2, queen b6, and now the move rook d1. Here was quite a critical moment, actually. After queen b6, I had a pretty nice chance, which is knight c3. This was probably kind of... I had two quite nice chances in this game, but this was one of them. And I saw this idea, but I just didn't evaluate the position correctly after knight c3. I mean, it looks so logical for him to take, but this, in fact, is already quite a big inaccuracy. Instead, he should go rook a8, objectively speaking, but I don't think anyone would make this move. For example, after bishop d5, e d5, knight d5. Now, the whole situation is a bit different. He does, of course, still have some compensation here, because this bishop on d7 is quite strong. In many cases, could go to f5 or to g4. But here I will kind of get rid of his bishop pair, at least if I can take on e7 next, and then followed by bishop g5 perhaps. And yeah, at least white is in no danger here at all. So after knight c3, it looks like super logical to take on c3, b takes e3, and these structures are very interesting in general, because if black has time to fully consolidate and trade some pieces, usually the bishop on e4 is quite important to trade. Like, if he could trade those two pieces, probably he's just better here, because I'm stuck with this isolated pawn on c3. But yeah, I just didn't have a good feeling for dynamics in this position here, and I thought it wouldn't be entirely enough play here. But it turns out that it's actually not the case, and white has very good chances here to start an attack on black's king. For example, rook fd8, rook b1 is quite strong, and I think I also missed this idea after queen c5 that I have rook b5, and after queen takes c3, bishop b2, and the queen on c3 is trapped, which is quite a nice idea. Instead of queen c5, he should of course go queen c7, and now h4 again is quite strong. Not such a surprising move. In general, in the last couple of years, everyone is playing h4, h5 in basically any position. So yeah, this would have been a nice chance, and here position is actually quite dangerous for black. I have some ideas with knight g5 sometimes, or just bishop g5 to trade those bishops, and he's just lacking time to get his bishop into the game with bishop c6. He's not in time for that. But instead I went rook d1, and after rook a d8, now I took on d5, which I already knew during the game that it's probably not a great move, but I just didn't see a good alternative. Again, knight c3 would be a better choice for me after knight c3, b takes c3. This inclusion, rook d8 and rook d1, probably favors black, but still, I do have enough play for this weak pawn on c3. Yeah, bishop takes d5, e takes d5, and now bishop e3. So I was already kind of looking for a bailout here, but in general, I just don't really like this decision taking on d5. Objectively, it's probably not a big mistake, but yeah, it just looks a little bit off. During the game, I was also thinking about moves like h3, for example, to prepare bishop takes d5, then later without allowing any possible bishop g4. But it also seemed a little bit slow here. So I just decided to do something. Bishop takes d5, e takes d5, and now bishop e3, kicking away black's queen, or not, because he played d4, sacrificing this pawn. But again, I'm somewhat underdeveloped here, and he does have some concrete threats here. Knight takes d4, knight takes e5, and now I went for knight f5, which now really things are starting to go into the wrong direction. Instead of knight f5, also Anish pointed out after the game that knight c3 would have been a better choice for me, just threatening knight d5 now. And queen g6, knight d5, bishop d6, knight f4. I think he even was talking about this exact position, now queen f6, for example. And he was saying that this is probably fine for white, which his assessment was completely correct. But still, it's a little bit dangerous for black, just because he has the bishop pair and these bishops are already looking to the king side. So I didn't really like that position and instead went for knight f5, which is more forcing. Now bishop c5, of course, has to be played. And now I went for bishop takes c5. The problem with knight e7 check, king h8, and knight d5, which I originally thought about, is that here he has this intermediate move bishop g4, which then later on I saw, and after knight b6, bishop e2, rook d8, knight c3, for example. A lot of pieces are hanging for now. I cannot take here because of rook d1, checkmate. That's the whole point. So I have to develop my pieces. Knight c3, takes, a b6, knight takes e2, and after rook d2, I stopped calculating because I just thought it's very bad, and it is. White does have some drawing chances here, but yeah, doesn't look nice from the far, especially. So I decided to take on c5, queen takes c5, and here at least I came up with a pretty nice defense. The only move that probably doesn't lose on the spot, rook d5. In general, my problem is it's his knight were on c3, then I'm in no trouble at all. But yeah, for now I cannot do many things because there's always queen c1, and especially now my knight is hanging. So knight e3, for example, I think here there were even some immediate problems, like bishop b5 was one idea, or even bishop g4 again, perhaps could be a tactical idea, and I didn't like any of this at all. So I went for rook d5. Now he cannot take because of knight e7, king h8, and knight takes d5. So he went queen c1, check, rook d1, and now the very accurate move, queen g5. If he goes queen f4, then after check and knight d5, I'm probably fine, because on the next move I can develop my knight to c3. So he went queen g5, and after now with the move queen g5, he had to see actually quite a lot. Queen takes e5 looks quite logical, and now bishop c6. This was the game. And now I'm a piece up for now, but he's threatening to have checkmate on g2 and to have a back rank mate on d1. So here I have to play this move knight h6, which is also the only defense. He took with the queen, knight c3, and now he played queen g6, which then gave back the favor to me, and here I was basically back in the game. Instead of queen g6, he should have taken and went rook e8. And here I'm surprisingly in a lot of trouble, just simply, again, because of my back rank issues. Rook e8, for example, queen d4 is an option, now queen g5. And now the bishop on c6 is the problem because I have a hard time defending mate on g2. Probably have to go g3. But then at some point the queen will probably appear on either f3 or h3, and I will most likely get checkmated. And queen c5 has the problem queen d2. I think this might have been the idea he missed, because now after queen c5 he doesn't have queen g5, but yeah, queen d2 is winning. But he went queen g6. Now I played knight d5, rook d8, and queen g3. Again, knight d7 wouldn't work because after takes there is checkmate on g2. So I played queen g3, and now after rook e2, here I was already in quite serious time trouble and played the move b3. which yeah, looks logical, just defending against taking on b2. But actually this is even worse than letting rook takes b2 happen, probably. King f1 would have been very nice, which I even saw during the game, but I didn't see what happens after rook fe8, and here the move is knight c7, and apparently white is now doing fine, because there are no current threats against the king, and he cannot simply move the rook, because then I will be the one giving some checks on the back rank. So this is the move I missed. After king f1, I'm probably okay. For example, if he takes here, takes rook b2, knight e7 check, and takes here rook d7, should probably be a draw. And after bishop b5, I could even go back king g1, and apparently white is okay here. But I played b3, seeing the following combination, but I thought at least now some pieces are going to get traded, and I will have some basically long-term drawing chances, but of course this resulting endgame is quite ugly to defend, to say the least. He took on g3, h6, g3, and now g6. By the way, I just wanted to point out why I went to d1. I would have liked to go to c1, because then in future endgames my rooks could immediately pile up on the 7th rank. But my issue was after rook c1 there, black again has some back rank ideas with queen c6, for example. And again, I cannot take because of rook a1, and I didn't like any of this. Also, queen c2 was there. I was a bit scared. So I went rook a1, he took and went g6, and here I played the move g4, which is just too slow. And now the position probably is already more or less indefendable. Maybe the computer will hold it, but it's already very close to being lost. Instead, I should play the very logical move rook d7. And after b6, I have rook 1 to d4. This is a very important idea. And now whenever he has rook e8, I have rook f4, and he has to stay passive on the 8th rank with his rook. Otherwise, he's losing f7. So this would have been quite strong. After rook d7, for example, rook c8 is also one idea, but after rook b7, rook c2, rook f1. White still has to be a little bit careful, because just my rook is so passive on f1, but in general it should be quite an easy draw, I think. So yeah, rook d7 was a big chance here to possibly save a draw, but instead I went g4, just trying to improve my pawn structure, and not letting him possibly fix my pawn structure with h7 to h5. That was the idea. So I went g4, and now we have a couple of moves which are not that important. I just did a couple of waiting, and he was slowly improving his position. And now we have this position here after b6. And here I went rook df3, which I thought for quite a long time, but then I just made quite a poor move. Instead, I should go king f3. And again, probably this position is lost, but black still needs to show quite a lot of technique. But I went rook df3, and now I somewhat missed that he has this idea rook e5 followed by rook e4, which is actually not that hard to spot. And instead, I should, again, probably play king f3 to not allow this idea of rook e5, rook e4. So I went rook d4, rook e4, rook d6, and here I was quite surprised that he went rook b4. Instead, I thought he would go rook 76. And now I probably have to exchange rooks at some point, because otherwise my pawn on g4 will fall as well. For example, rook d7. And now after rook f6, I have to exchange. And I thought that something like this is probably always lost, because black will just slowly push b5 and a4. But he played rook b4, and after rook c3, now g5, king f1, rook e6, and now I decided to go for this endgame. I know that I said before that this is for sure lost with the pawn still here, but I thought with the pawn on e6 it might be, at least some more chances, because I thought the pawn could get weak in some cases, but it turns out this endgame is just completely lost as well. Played f3, king f6, king e2, b5, and as I said before, he's just advancing his pawn, and now he also has ideas with rook b3 to possibly trade rooks, and the pawn endgames are always lost, because his king is just much faster than mine, who will be stuck on the king side. So I played king c2. Now rook b3 doesn't work, because I can take, and after king e5, I'm just in time to stop his king from coming in with king c3. So he played king e5, and now already rook b3 is a major threat. So I went rook c6, and after rook b3, I tried f4 check, and here he played king d5. I think much easier, what we also discussed after the game, is the move king f6, which just doesn't give any pawns here at all. And if f5, he can simply go rook e3 and slowly unpin, and black will win, because also these pawns are just very weak, and at least one of them will fall in the near future. But he went king d5, which is still winning, rook a6, rook takes g3, and now I played rook a5 check. Instead, I could have also taken here and taken on a4, but here it's quite unlucky that he's just in time. King e5, king d2, and now rook f3. If my king is already on e2 here, it's actually a draw, but now he has rook f3, and then rook f4 will come, and I will lose this pawn on g4. So black is just in time here. But I went rook a5 check, king e4, and now rook takes a4. Another option would be to take here, and after rook g5, argue that white has some drawing chances. But also here, white is not fast enough. e5 will come, and then simply this pawn or this pawn are just too strong, and black is winning. So instead, I tried to take here, king f3, and now f5. I thought at least I will have some drawing chances here, because my pawn is actually quite fast. He played rook g2 check, king d3, takes, rook f2, placing the rook behind the pawn, and preparing, for example, king g3. I played king d4, but now king g3 would probably be too slow, because I'm coming in with king e5, so therefore he played king f4. f6, and now he made a big blunder, and actually this gave me a concrete chance basically to make a draw, but unfortunately I didn't see it. He went for king f5, which is probably the most logical move in the entire position, but it turns out here I have a fantastic defense, which if you want to solve this position, take some time here and try to figure out the way to draw. I think it's a very nice exercise. Instead of king f5, basically any move would win. For example, g4 or h5, just pushing the pawns, and if f7, just king g3 will come, and then black can stop this pawn, and these two pawns are just way too fast. But he went king f5, and now I went f7, which again looks quite logical. By the way, I just also want to point out one trick here. He could go rook b2 to get behind the pawn, which I was hoping for, or rook c2. It's the same. But here I have this very pretty move, king c3, and all of a sudden I'm winning, because I'm picking up the rook on b2. He went king f5, and now the correct drawing move is not f7, but it's king e3, which looks somewhat counterintuitive, because you want to bring the king forward to help support this pawn, but the pawn on f6 is anyway lost, which I didn't fully realize yet. And after king e3, rook b2, f7, rook b8, king f3, rook f8, rook a5 check, king g6. Now white has this fantastic idea, king g4, and white is just in time to set up this drawing idea with king h5. And if you get this sort of constellation against these two connected pawns with rooks, then it's in many cases already a draw, because he cannot move the rook from this diagonal. After rook f1, there's rook a7 check, and if he moves the king, I can give check again. Of course, I shouldn't take right away, because there's rook h1 check mate. But instead, checking, and white will make a draw here, and otherwise black cannot do anything. He can just wait, and this would be a draw. But I didn't see this idea that the king is coming over to the queen side. It's also quite tough to spot, I think, if you're in major time trouble. So in this position, I went f7, and after king g6, rook a6 check, king g7, I realized that he will just pick up this pawn on f7, and I'm just lost here. Of course, he just shouldn't take on f7, because then after rook takes h6, it would be a draw. But he went king g7, king e5, and won this pawn. I just tried waiting a little bit for him to show the technique, but he did so, of course, and yeah, here I resigned, because if I go back, then simply g4 and g3 followed by g2 is coming, and he will simply make at least one new queen. So I resigned, and yeah, that was this game. I just want to say what I learned overall. I think the most important thing is that I really need to work on my time management. That's the first thing. It was just I was spending way too much time in the opening in positions that are just not critical at all. I really need to work on that. And otherwise, yeah, the middle game, if we could go back to this moment where I had knight c3, I need to work a little bit on my dynamic feeling, I think, overall. This would be one thing to work on. Let's just go back to this moment. It was here after queen b6, knight c3. I think a very nice idea also for you guys to remember, especially for me, for the future games. And then there was this idea with h4, and white has quite a nice attack. So this was an important moment. And yeah, otherwise I just really enjoyed the opportunity to play against Anish Giri, and yeah, hope to have learned some lessons from this game. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And otherwise, I'll see you soon.